Good morning. He already had me turned on. Good morning. We're going to start over here. How are the Moody's today?
Yes, no kidney stone. It was an issue where he had surgery. The last,
And you are doing okay too, right?
I got shots, so I'm good.
Everything in the Clunch household fine. Remember Terry always. Talked to Dave this morning, and his number one is coming home late this evening, probably around 11 o'clock if the plane's on time. So let's keep her in mind for a safe journey, and also his parents out there. Yes, ma'am.
We are leaving some point later this week. Half of my family's going one way, the other half of my family's going the other way, and we're gonna all meet up in Missouri. So we have a lot of time on the road.
Okay. Keep the monks in mind as they travel. Brother George said he was doing better, but we still need to think about him. And I think that's it.
Reverend Blakely Johnson, the 3-year-old, just got a tumor that was malignant. She's undergoing chemotherapy.
Okay, and that name again?
Blakely.
Blakely. Okay. Blakely Johnson. Okay. Yes, sir.
I just found out yesterday my brother in Huntsville, he's having surgery. His foot has become infected. And with COVID protocols, only one person is allowed, and his granddaughter is there with him. As I just found out yesterday, but his surgery is tomorrow sometime.
Okay. Keep Brother George's brother in mind that's going to be having surgery in Huntsville tomorrow. Of course, I can't let it go by without telling you ladies thank you. Glad all of you showed up yesterday for breakfast. Just a small token of how much we care and appreciate you. So, Brother Dave, would you lead us in a prayer before we begin class, please?
Heavenly Father, we're thankful that you bless us with another Lord's Day upon this earth. We're thankful, Father, that we have the opportunity to come here this morning and study from your word. We are mindful, Father, of those who are in need of medical attention and care. We know, Father, that all things are good, and you know better than we. We pray, Father, that whatever your will is done will be carried out. Father, be with Larry as he leads us this morning as we look at the book of Daniel. Daniel's been exact and always been faithful, Father, no matter what the circumstances are. Continue to be with us, Father, as we serve thee and we might be lights to those around us. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. This week we start with a little timeline issue that we need to make sure that we understand, because a lot of people out in the world, a lot of the worldly scholars, they look at Daniel chapter 1 verse 1 and Daniel chapter 2 verse 1 and say, oh, there's a contradiction there. Those two things can't happen as they are. So what we need to do is back up, and if you recall last week, as we read verse 1, it says, in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem, and besieged it. And then we went back to 2 Kings 24 and verse 1 that said, in his days Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up, and Jehoiakim became his servant 3 years. Then he turned and rebelled against him. So now if we look at well, let's go on down also to in chapter 1 of Daniel, verse 3. It was the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes. Then if you go over and look at verse 1 of chapter 2, it says, in the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. In his 2nd year as king, when we had already said that he was king years before that, and Jehoiakim had served him for 3 years? And how do we reconcile all of that? How do we harmonize it? I've got my way of doing it, and I'm going to give you that. And if you want to deviate a little bit from it, we're not saying my way is should be the way that's set in stone. But out of everything that I have read and studied on it, it's the one that makes sense to me. And Brother Rex Turner Sr. wrote a book on the book of Daniel, and he and I agree about 99% of the way, but I'm different from him in one respect. If you recall last week, I said that Nebuchadnezzar's father was ill, and he sent Nebuchadnezzar to Carchemish to put down the Assyrians once and for all. And that is where Josiah was killed, and then that's when Jehoiakim became king of Judah. So he got along with Nebuchadnezzar for 3 years, and then in 605, Nebuchadnezzar came and besieged Jerusalem. Well, historically, the secular history line puts Nebuchadnezzar's death at 605. So if that be the case, then Nebuchadnezzar was co-regent or co-reigned with his father for the first few years. And when he was sent to Carchemish, he was a co-king instead of the king. And then in 605, when his father died, he became the king of Babylon. Now, that puts it at 605. If you also remember last week, I said that Daniel, being a student of the Chaldean and writing from the Chaldean perspective, the first year that somebody became king was the year of ascension. So that would make Nebuchadnezzar's year of ascension in 605. Then his first year as king on his own, not co, but his first year would be 604. Well, we got a little issue here because it puts Daniel and his 3 companions, they have not fully served out their 3 years yet to become a part of that group, right? So, if we look down at verse 13 of chapter 2, and before we read that, remember that Nebuchadnezzar had the dream in his first year, meaning his first full year, which would be the first year of training. Well, actually, it'd be in their second year because their first year would be his year of ascension. But anyway, around their second year of training. And Nebuchadnezzar is unhappy with the wise men and the magicians and the Chaldeans because they won't interpret his dream. So he's going to send out and have them all killed. And then verse 13 it says, "The decree went forth that the wise men should be slain, and they sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain." I think that this verse, and this is just my opinion, I think this verse explains that Daniel and his companions are still under the rule of the king, learning and growing, and they are not considered part of the wise men yet. Or else, why would they point out that they come after Daniel and his companions? And then when Daniel, in verse 14, Daniel answered with counsel and the wisdom of Arioch, the captain, and said, which was gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon, he answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, "Why is the decree so hasty from the king? then Arioch made the thing known to Daniel. So again, that tells me that Daniel is still sort of in this sheltered area over here, but has enough mobility that he sees what's going on and he can inquire what's going on. And then he asks for counsel with the king, and we'll get into the rest of the story later. But the way I put the timeline and the sequence is Nebuchadnezzar became king in his own right in 605. That's the year that they brought the children, that Daniel and his companions, into Babylon to be trained. The next year would be their technically second year and his first year as king when he had this dream. So Daniel and his group is not yet considered to be among the wise men yet, because they're still learning. That's where Brother Turner and I are slightly different, because he wants it to be that Daniel and his companions have served out their 3 years, have been placed there, but yet they've sort of graduated from the king's palace, but they hadn't started work yet. Well, if you do that, in my way of looking at it, that throws your timeline off, because that means then that the king, that he would have to ascend to the throne in their second year, which doesn't make sense, at least to me. So now that I have got you totally baffled, thrown out the mud, somebody else take over and speak. Brother Terry, Brother Jeremy, somebody. You just gonna leave me up here flailing, huh? Well, let me ask you this: does that make sense? Does that line up make sense? Okay. Good answer. Thank you for that. Okay. So let's just start with the questions, and we've got so many of these questions to go through that we'll take the questions and go from there. And as you see, if you've got your handouts, the very first question says, "In what year did Nebuchadnezzar dream dreams that troubled him?" In the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, which would have been 604, 603 if you want to go that far with it. The 3-year training of Daniel in Daniel 1:5 may be reconciled with the second year dream as follows. And then they go with the first year, second year, and want to make it down into the third year of his graduation, which he and I are about a year off there. Does it make that much difference? Because the Bible is 100% accurate, right? Daniel wrote the book. Daniel knows exactly what he's talking about. 2,000 years later, since we don't completely, there's a few in here that speak, learn, or have learned some Hebrew, but yet we're in the ballpark, and the Bible is correct. So, second question, who was commanded by King Nebuchadnezzar to tell him his dreams and make his interpretation?
Magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and the Chaldeans.
Who are the Chaldeans?
The learned set people there.
Okay, they're a little group of people, sort of considered the wise. Not everybody that lived in Babylon could do all this, and that's one reason that the king wanted Daniel and his companions to learn the language of in Chaldean, because what did he want? What were the characteristics of the ones that he wanted brought to Babylon? The young people. No blemish. Remember, that gets over in the first chapter. We'll go back to the first chapter down around verse 4. Whom was no blemish, well-favored, skillful in all wisdom, cunning in knowledge, understanding science, ability to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans, the wise folks. So, Question 3, what did the Chaldeans tell the king? And this is in Daniel 2:4. What did the wise men tell the king? I'm sorry? Tell us the dream and we'll interpret it. Because he had told them, you tell me the dream and tell me the interpretation. Verse 4, or question 4, what was the penalty of if the Chaldeans would not tell the king the dream and make the interpretation known? They would be chopped in pieces and their houses or their homes would be made dunghills. Question 5, what was the reward if one could tell the king the dream and make the interpretation?
Receive gifts, rewards, and great honor.
Receive gifts, rewards, and great honor. Question 6, when the servants asked the king again to tell them the dreams, he accused them of gaining time and charged them with preparing what? Lying and corrupt words. I'm going to pause there because the next question gets to the, in my opinion, to the meat of the matter. Why do you think the king would not tell them his dream? If he wanted his dream interpreted, because we go later dreams, they tell the dream and then somebody tells the interpretation. Why do you think that he wouldn't tell the dream, that he wanted the wise men or the magicians to come up with not only the interpretation, but the dream?
Didn't it say it escaped him?
Couldn't recall it?
Couldn't recall it?
Anybody got another thought?
Testimony to see what actually they could do.
Might be testing the people? Okay.
You gotta really feel for these guys, though. They get called before the king, and they get along okay, and, bluffing their way through a lot of stuff, and he says, well, you tell me what I dreamed, and then you can interpret it. They're going, oh, we can't do that. We can't do that, king.
And the next question tells us why. Question 7. The Chaldeans advised the king that only the blank could tell him his dream and make the interpretation. God. Well, they use the phrase gods, but so what does that tell us then about the magicians, the astrologers, and the wise and the Chaldeans?
Faith.
Fake? They had at least limited ability. There's, I don't know if y'all watch it or not, but Andrew and I watch America's Got Talent when it comes on, and some of the magicians and mentalists and other people like that. You wonder how they do what they do. But one of the courses that I had to take when I was in the military is reading body language to try to decipher if somebody is being honest and forthright or not. I don't know if Terry did in his job being an MP, but he wasn't in the interrogation room with them. But it is amazing. It is strictly amazing how nurses are good at this too. How you can read a person's eyes and know if they're telling you the truth and what's going on. The old phrase, the eyes are the window to the soul, that is a very appropriate saying. And these wise people, if he told them the dream, they can make up pretty much anything, can't they?
Tell him what he wants to hear.
Tell them what to, the way these psychics work, and I never went to a psychic. One of my uncles, rest his soul, he would go to a palm reader. They know so much. He had full faith that what that palm reader was telling him was absolute truth, and that they was reading what would happen to him in the future. And that is even after it didn't come true several times. He would still go back. As Brother Terry's mentioned in some of his lessons, these people that predict the end of the world, well, it didn't happen. They got to change their mind to another date. Didn't happen. They got to change their mind to another date. So, and there you go. And the thing is that the way they word horoscopes and the way they word fortune cookies, they are so generic that I don't care which cookie you take, it's going to happen to you 99% of the time. So that's where these astrologers and the wise are at this point. Questions, comments? Question 8 then was, what did the king command because of this answer? When the Chaldeans had advised the king that only the gods, in their phrasing, could tell them what was going on, what did the king command? Destroy all the wise men of Babylon. Question 9, when Daniel heard the decree, what did he ask the king? Well, through Arioch, but give him a little bit of time. Apparently the king agreed to that, but why would he agree to a little bit of time for Daniel, but he was ready to, and I'd already put out the decree to go kill all the wise men?
Maybe Daniel is one that is not, like you were saying before, not necessarily considered a wise man at that point in time, still in training, really. That's why it's called out separately.
Technically there, but when Daniel also tells him what he wants to hear, give me a little time and I can do it. That's what he wanted all along. So, yes, sir.
I don't know if this is just the difference in reading, but the English Standard doesn't say to give him time. It reads, he told the king to appoint him a time.
Okay.
Basically, you tell me when you want me to show up, and I'll tell you what this dream means.
Okay.
I don't know if that changes. There's a little bit of difference. The people before said, tell us the dream and then give us time.
Yeah.
Here he says, give me the time and I'll tell you the dream interpretation.
Yeah. Brother Jeremy and Brother Terry was both pointing out that some translations refer to this a little bit different. And I'm looking at King James, that where he asked for to give me a little bit of time and I can tell you. And other translations say, appoint me a time to come to you and I'll tell you. And then, as Brother Terry pointed out, the others were wanting the king to tell them the dream, but Daniel said, if I get this, then I can tell you the dream. There's since Brother Jeremy brought it up, there's also, if you look at verse 13 in the New King James and a couple of others, it doesn't say the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain. In some of those translations, it says that they began to be slain. On that particular part, I like the King James because I don't think at this point that any killing had started. Daniel wanted to know why he was so hasty to do this. And knowing the way, historically, the way the Chaldean or the Babylonians would have done it, He wouldn't have told them just to go out and kill them. He would have wanted to make a big show of it and bring them all to one place and say, we're getting rid of all of you. So I don't personally think the killing had started yet, but
Another reason why he might have missed it at that moment is that, in the first chapter we see that Daniel had a reputation that he never interpreted dreams.
right, he was the only one that was of the.
I'm assuming the king knew that, because they were presented to the king, and they probably said, well, here's all their tactics, here's what they can do. I don't know why he didn't call from them in person.
Well, that is a good question.
That's another reason why I think he was kind of testing his own quote-unquote wise.
Question number 9. When Daniel heard the decree, what did he ask the king? We've already just spoke of that, why you been in such haste. Asked a little time. Question 10. Daniel and his companions desired blank of God that they should not perish with the wise men of Babylon. Mercies. Again, this one sort of is one reason I think that they haven't graduated yet and gone into that, because they're still set apart. They don't want to be like the other wise folks. That means they're not in that group yet. Question 11, how was the secret revealed to Daniel? Night vision. In the Old Testament, there were multiple ways they did it: dreams, night visions, and here was a night vision. Question 12. Daniel acknowledged the wisdom and power of God and his rule over the universe and the affairs of men. List the examples of God's power named by Daniel, and this is in verses 20 through 22. I tell you what, probably the best thing to do is just somebody read verses 20 through 22. Okay.
Daniel said, let the name of God be blessed forever and ever, for wisdom and power belong to him. It is he who changed the times and empires. He removes kings and establishes kings. He gives wisdom to wise men and knowledge to men of understanding. It is he who reveals the profound and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and power. Even now you made known to me what was requested of you, and you have made known to us the king's matter.
Pretty good list of things to recognize.
That's one thing we really have to keep in mind when we see things happening in the world, and we think, well, why is that happening? For some reason, God has those people in power.
Yes, sir.
You don't have to understand why.
And I don't,
I don't either.
but you are right. Question 13. Question 13. Whom did Daniel credit for his wisdom and his might? God. Question 14. When Daniel appeared before Nebuchadnezzar, he first reminded the king that the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers of his kingdom could not tell the dream or the interpretation. Then Daniel told him of one who revealeth secrets. And who is this one? God in heaven. Now the astrologers and all had spoke of gods, and here Daniel pointed out singularity, one. Question 15, the secret of the king's dream was revealed to Daniel that the king might know what? The thoughts of his heart. I'm going to read 31 through about 34, and then we'll go back and look at those questions. Starting with verse 31. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them in pieces. Let me continue a little farther. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like chaff of the summer threshing floor, and the winds carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. So if we go back and look, starting with question 16, the king saw a great image, brightness was excellent, and the form was terrible. Now, question 17, what was the head? Fine gold, breast and arms, silver, belly and thighs, legs, feet. Now, if you just look at that description of those things, in descending order, the most valuable is at the top, and each succeeding element is of lesser value, which falls in then with the interpretation part. So what did the stone that was cut without hands do? Smoke. Broke everything up. So what would be, if it was cut without hands, what would that signify? Higher power made it, yeah. Question 19. Just went through that. They were broken up to pieces, chaff, wind, that no place was found for them. Question 20. What became of the stone that smote the image? Became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Question 20.
Something else when I see that statue, not only is it more precious on the top going down, but it's also the metals that it's made of are stronger and stronger as you get down to the iron and nickel. But still, it didn't help.
That also is a good point. If I can summarize that, I had said that the metals were from the top down, descending order. As you went down, they were less valuable. But on the other hand, as Brother A just pointed out, you can flip that around as the stronger till you get to the feet where there's the mixture. But the iron is stronger than brass. Brass is stronger than silver, and silver is stronger than gold in their purest form. So, yes, sir.
Another way to look at it, each of those metals that you move down is also less resistant to change. We see, and I think it's interesting when you think about it, because now, with Nebuchadnezzar and things that follow, they become less able to listen to the people of God. You see here, he's talking to Daniel, listening to his wisdom. By the time you get to the Romans, they're like, no, we got this. What you have to say doesn't matter. They become more brittle and easy to break.
Less flexible or less malleable would be another way to, same difference, yeah.
They had no idea what the dream was. Imagine if somebody said, well, tell me the dream I had last night and what I did last night. We wouldn't have any idea, wouldn't be any way to figure out some of the everything like that.
quite true. Question 21. Daniel then told Nebuchadnezzar the interpretation of the dream. And who is the head? Nebuchadnezzar. He's the gold, he's the head. And question 22. The various parts of the human image and the materials represent 4 world blank kingdoms. Each succeeding metal, therefore, each succeeding kingdom is inferior to the one before it. What characteristic of the 4th kingdom was not mentioned about the prior 3 kingdoms? Something about what? Look at 40, verse 40. Verse 40, yeah. And the 4th kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these things, shall it break in pieces and bruise. So the 4th kingdom that's coming into place is going to be taken over, replacing everything. The significance of the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, indicate the lack of cohesion in the kingdom, strong as iron, fragile as potter's clay. But the 2 materials will not cleave one to another. This is a good point to take you into the New Testament area just a little bit and have you think of something. If you look at the Roman Empire as a whole, was the Roman Empire strong? For a while. It grew and grew and grew. But at the same time it was growing, was it also fragile? What had the Romans done that would make it fragile? As they're growing, what's one thing that they did that would make it fragile? I'm sorry?
Spread themselves pretty thin. You have the entire area, so how do you keep control of it over?
They had spread themselves thin because they grew so rapidly, but that's not what I had in mind. What I had in mind was that they had made agreements, and what did they allow the Jews to do? You can do everything up to a point. You can't kill anybody, but you can do all this up to a point, and then you have to get us involved. If you recall what happened when there was going to be a Jewish insurrection, the governor wanted that put down real quick, because if he didn't put down the insurrection or the uprising of the Jews, what was going to happen to him? The emperor was going to get rid of him, lop off his head. Also, another thing that makes it fragile is during the time of Nero didn't get along with anybody because he was a nutcase, to put it bluntly. I mean, he killed his own family members, and he married 2 men, castrated one of them and called him his wife, and called the other his husband. I mean, he was a real nutcase. And what happens if, sorry, Miss Barbara, that's just the facts. But how does if we break it down to a simple military unit, how does a military unit have cohesion? Good leadership. If you don't have good leadership, it's chaos. And what brought down the Roman Empire is, as Brother Jeremy said, it was strong for a while, but what brought down the empire, was it an external or an internal force? Little of both, but it mainly imploded because of things. So that summarizes the feat, I think, that things just didn't.
really enjoyed the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. It really was.
The fourth kingdom has been given the greatest space and attention because it was during the days of these kings, the fourth world kingdom, the God of heaven shall what? Set up his kingdom. And what will that kingdom do? Stand forever, never be destroyed. If we look at 500 years in the future from the book of Daniel at this point, is that what happened? Didn't Christ set up his kingdom? And to this day, is that kingdom not still strong as ever or stronger than ever? 27, the kingdom of God is different from the four worldly kingdoms. How? And if we look at verse 44 in Daniel, it says, "And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever." So what, if we look at it, the origin in the worldly kingdom was human. The kingdom of God was of what origin? Spiritual, God. The worldly kingdom, the duration was temporary. What about the heavenly kingdom? Forever. In the worldly kingdom, the power could be overcome by succeeding kingdoms. What about the power of the heavenly kingdom? It's going to destroy all others. It's not going to be overtaken. Question 28. Repetition of the picture of the stone being cut out of the mountain without hands and breaking in pieces the image emphasize the kingdom of God shall blank, and all these kingdoms shall stand blank. Consume all and stand forever. In question 29, when King Nebuchadnezzar heard the interpretation of his dream, what did he do? Fell down and worshiped Daniel and gave him all those things that he said he would do. Plus, what position of power did he put Daniel in? In essence, he was second to the king at this point. So now we have a person that was a young person, a teenager, was taken captive from his homeland, brought in and put in to be trained and learn, and then almost immediately he becomes the second most powerful person in the kingdom. Would you call that a little bit of divine intervention going on? Question number 30 then was, whom did King Nebuchadnezzar acknowledge as supreme? He worshiped Daniel, fell down and worshiped Daniel, but now he's recognizing God, because if you go back to the story, he talks about Daniel's God being the supreme. And 31 we've already answered. He was given great gifts, power to rule. Question 32, Daniel requested that the king set blank, blank, and blank over the affairs of the province of Babylon. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, his three companions. And the last question then is, where did Daniel sit? In the gate of the king. personally, I don't like to do the question and answer thing like that. I like for y'all to do the questions and answers and us just take it verse by verse, but there's no way I could have, we could have finished this second chapter today if we hadn't have done it that way. So I've got about a minute left. Questions, comments? I'm sorry? That's true. Building's only good as its foundation.
Once again, we'll see in the next lesson. Sit down. How soon they forget.
How soon they forget. Anything else? Going once? Saved by the bell. Thank y'all so much for your attention and your comments.